Hello, Bible readers. It is Monday, April 5th. Happy Easter. We are reading from Isaiah chapters 44 to 48 and Romans chapter 9, verse 30 to chapter 10, verse 10. And actually what I was just learning about went all the way through verse 21, I believe. But to start with Isaiah, I formed you in chapter 44. God's talking about, I formed you. We remain in trial proceedings, and idolatry is the charge in question. In verse 24 of chapter 44, we enter a section grounded in Cyrus and the nations. Cyrus, of course, is said to accomplish God's work, not his own. That's the claim, that for God to use a Persian to release Israel from Babylon is an extraordinary story. And so the author here wants to claim that God had the divine freedom to do whatever God wants to do, in this case, a new thing, and so God did a new thing. Isaiah 48 is something like a call narrative for this second Isaiah section. And we're leading up toward chapters 49 to 53 are going to be a whole new section of Isaiah. Okay, Romans. So we're still in this section, God's promises and faithfulness, that go through chapter 11, verse 36. So that's where we are in Paul's Romans here. Today's Romans text covers God's covenant faithfulness revealed in the Messiah. So Paul's trying to make sense of and tell the story of the Messiah, the meaning of the Messiah. The Messiah, according to Paul, is God's renewal of the covenant, but not only with the chosen people. And that's what he's trying to help explain. Now, Gentiles are included in the covenant too. Scholars argue over chapter 10, verse 4, when it says the Messiah is, some translate it the end. Some say the Messiah is a completion, a fulfillment. My commentary says, no, the Messiah is the goal of the Torah, the goal of the law. It's an interesting way to think of it, that the Torah is building toward Messiah. I'm going to read just a paragraph from my commentary here. The most important thing Paul does in this section is to explain where he, his readers, and the people he is discussing are within God's story with Israel and the world. It is the story of how people who had no heirs, no graces of their own, no thought of being sought out by Israel's God, the Creator, nevertheless found themselves grasped by the divine call and love as an act of sheer grace. And it's also the story, here Paul is doing some deconstruction of his own, of the shock received by the people who thought the God and world story could only be told and would always be told with them coming out on top. The climax of their own history was a Messiah who, from their point of view, was an anti-Messiah. The king came, and instead of setting his people free, he died their death and invited them to follow him. Only if they do so will they find the fulfillment of their own story. He is indeed the true king, the world's true Lord, and will give salvation to all who call on his name. That is a disconcerting message for some fellow Jews with Paul, and that's what he's trying to get across in Romans, is the place of Israel in this new creation. That actually it's no longer a special, unique place, and instead they have a special, unique past where they were the covenant people, but now God has made that to be much larger. And so as much as God was doing a new thing with Cyrus the Persian, because God gets to do what God wants to do, we see that divine freedom expressing itself again, as Paul describes it in Romans. Connections. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us at all times and in all places.